of the things that has been really disorienting for a lot of people, certainly really disorienting for my family over these past 6 months of pandemic life, has definitely been the loss of our regular rhythms and routines, especially around bedtime. So when the kids were doing their distance learning back in the spring, we eventually managed to establish some semblance of a routine, but especially into the summer when we didn't even really have that to sort of anchor our days, we found that we were going to bed like later and later, and consequently we were waking up and starting our days later and later as well. Now, there are a lot of stories that a lot of people found this has happened to a lot of people. The pandemic has affected their sleep, so maybe we don't feel so bad. But there's also a lot of research out there that suggests that routines and habits, especially around bedtime and sleep, are really good for us on a lot of levels, can be really healthy for us physically and mentally and emotionally as well. And while I don't want to discount that there are all kinds of reasons that people don't sleep, and during a pandemic, stress is a big one. I don't sleep well when I'm stressed. But I think there's also a component, certainly for my family, there was this component where there's a discipline piece to it as well. Going to bed early enough, waking up early enough is, those are things that require work, that require a little bit of discipline. Discipline. That's a word that you might have all kinds of feelings about. That's a word that you might not like, that can sound kind of restrictive and a bit like a drag, maybe especially if God has wired you to be a really creative, spontaneous person. You might find the word discipline kind of rubs you the wrong way. But what I'd like to suggest to you today in Pastor's Corner is that maybe there are some ways in which discipline, rather than being restrictive, can actually set you free. I want to show you this drawing from my office. Now, this is a drawing by Ann King from our congregation that I bought from her last year, and I love it. I love how she's drawn these gorgeous pansies. But what I want to draw your attention to actually is not just the drawing, but the mat around the outside, and how this mat really serves to augment the beauty of Anne's creation. Now, if Anne had drawn this, had sold me this drawing with no matting and just the drawing, it still would have been gorgeous. Or if she had drawn it on this huge piece of paper without even like a border around the outside, still would have been beautiful. But I don't know that we would have been able to appreciate the beauty of her creation in quite the same way. The mat kind of draws our eyes there and allows us to focus. You know, this idea of discipline can be applied to all sorts of areas of our lives. Prayer, for example, is one of our areas of focus over the next 2 years here at Highview. And often, depending on what tradition you come from or what your background is, we might not think that prayer and discipline are things that necessarily go together. We sometimes might think prayer has to be this really spontaneous interchange between us and God. But I wonder what would happen if, like a mat around a drawing, we thought of applying some intentionality to our prayer lives. Like, what would happen? This could look all kinds of different ways depending on who you are and how God has made you. Like, maybe it's as simple as signing up for our weekly prayer request email, and then you build 5 minutes into your day where you simply pray for the needs of our congregation. Or maybe you set up a monthly phone date or video chat date with a friend, and together you pray in that way. Maybe you want to write your prayers out in a journal, and you build some time into your life to do that. But like a mat around a drawing, I'm curious to see what might happen if we apply a little bit of structure and intentionality to our prayer lives together. You might be surprised.